plant, the same way. And again, it's nice and moist, so it's not going to stress it too much. And the reason I do that is so I can get a smaller plant to go in there. And I'm going to tuck that in there just for a little contrast next to the green ivy.
Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me.
They haven't screamed yet. Okay, we're going to get a few more here.
What size are those?
And these are 4-inch. Now, we also have 6-inch. Depending on the size basket you're working with, use the largest plants that you can to get the size that you need. So the larger baskets typically have larger spaces. So on a basket this size, I actually use 6-inch material, which is the size of the ivy. And then this is a 17-inch, so the 4-inch is a real good size. But I'm still dividing them just so I can get more small pieces to tuck in. Okay.
Hearing those roots rip just.
Another way when you're dividing plants, if you have a larger plant and you want to be able to tell if you can divide it or not, actually look at the plant. Very oftentimes in, say, a tub this size, they'll actually have 3 individual plants. If that's the case, you could actually take a knife and cut them. You're not separating the root system, you're separating just the individual plants. And that's really easy if you have a really large plant but you want to use that one. That's what I did with these impatiens. I would have preferred to use 6-inch, but we didn't have them, so I took the 10-inch tubs that had 3 plants each and just divided them and used them that way.
This one you're making would be shade, right?
This one's going to be for shade, so I'm using the little polka dot plants and the ivies. And I'm just going to tuck on either side of the ivy there, and just kind of, just kind of balance it all the way around.
How long have you been making baskets?
Oh, for several years. I'd say probably about 10 years now. And another thing to consider is the angle at which you place the plants. Typically, the things that are going to be in the lower portion, you want to either use trailing plants or you want to take the plants and kind of angle them downward. And then you want to gradually just sort of, fan them up so that the center of the basket has the most upright, and then just kind of, it should have a more natural flow. As opposed to a mistake that people do make often is to plant everything straight up. They just put the root balls like this. Plants don't care if they're growing this way or this way. It doesn't matter to them. They're going to grow out wherever the sunlight and the moisture is. So you can see I'm actually laying these right on their side, so they're going to grow out, and that's what happens here. When they grow in, you're just going to get a big mass of color. And everything sort of intermingles, so you almost can't tell one plant from another. Now I've got those in place. I'm going to do another layer. And I'm just tucking moss down in there just to hold those little polka dots in place. And these little polka dots are really easy. They are another one of those really forgiving plants, so I use them quite often. They don't mind being moved around and ripped up. They will grow right out and grow through that moss and that soil and just add a little dimension of contrast there. Even though they're not flowering, they do add a little bit of color. They also come in red and white, which is kind of fun depending on the color scheme you're using. Okay, and let's see. We need to add a little color now, so what I'm going to do next is add, now we haven't got to flowers yet, this is still foliage we're talking with, but you're going to see contrast in foliage color. This is a little shade plant called Lysimachia. It's the same thing. Lysimachia is the botanical name. This variety is often referred to as creeping jenny. It does have a little yellow flower in the summer. But I just like it because the foliage is just such a bright green that it just really makes a nice contrast. This is a 4-inch that I'm using, typical bedding plant size. And I'm tucking it in the same way, just all the way around.
Are you able to overplant?
I'm sorry?
Are you able to overplant?
Yes, you can. You're talking about putting them on top of each other?
Yeah,
Or?
as in knowing how much roots.
Yeah, it depends on the plants. Again, these are, they're moist, so you can actually manipulate the shape. You don't have to plant necessarily just because it grew in a square pot, it has a square root ball, but you can manipulate it and flatten it so you can get more plants in there. I'm basically placing these at this point in between the others, so there is some space for the roots there. And same thing here, this is a little trailing plant that's just going to kind of, you want to pull it right through here. And that's just going to give another A little bit of contrast there.
Do you just wing this when you do it, or have you got a scheme in your mind?
Nope, I just wing it. I
No
don't
two
plan
baskets are the
anything.
same.
Huh?
No two
No,
baskets are the same.
That's why when people have me make custom baskets, they go, well, let me go ahead and pay you for it now. And I say, don't bother, because I don't know what I'm going to do yet. And that's exactly how it is. And that's what's fun about it, is you can be creative. You can pull flowers. What looks good one day may not look good the next. Pull the things that look the best. And just as you work, you'll just kind of see what you like. And again, if you plan as far as your light conditions and that sort of thing, you have a general idea of what you can and can't do, but you can change it. And a lot of it's just personal taste. I like bright colors, lots of contrast. Other people may prefer to do a basket that's all maybe white and green or in pastels. You know, pick what you like, because you're going to be looking at it for a long
Now,
time.
that last one you put in to go into the same rung, does it make any difference?
Not really, because what's going to happen is they're going to
The
grow
filling?
this way, and it's going to grow into the soil. That one has not
Yeah,
quite as
got
much
it.
space.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about, especially when you're doing your hanging baskets, plants are not going to grow in a perfectly symmetrical manner. So don't focus too much on trying to make it perfect, because it's going to just kind of grow in. It should look natural, and it should look beautiful, but it doesn't have to look manufactured. It does not have to look perfect. Now on this particular one, I am going to put something in the center, and I do like to use, I've got so many plants here I can't walk. This is a bird's nest fern. And I typically like to put something in the center of a basket that's going to give it some height and give it a little bit of upright contrast.
What about the sun requirements for the birds?
This is a shade plant as well. So this whole basket, I'm doing things that are going to be for shade. Now, one word of warning, ferns do not like to be divided. Do not try to rip up the root system on a maidenhair fern or a bird's nest fern. You will kill it, and it will not be happy. The reason I'm going to this point now is I just kind of want to get my placement so I see how much. What I'm going to end up doing is raising this a little bit, because this is going to actually end up being a little higher in the center. So I'm going to build the center portion up.
Donna, how large will that bird nest fern get?
It can get, there's different varieties, but typically it'll get about 18 inches tall. Now there are some that get larger. And Sylvia, I think, can tell you this. She had one that kind of grew out in a pot that she had planted, and it was sort of taking over. So you can go through and clip some of the larger leaves to make space for your other plant. But it has a very upright growth habit and an interesting bright green color, which makes a nice contrast. Now you can see here, I'm going to build the center up just so I can place that root ball right there. Now I need my color essentials.
Now, I notice everything you put in there right now will last a few years.
Um,
Now, there's gonna be other plants that you're sticking in that are flowering that probably won't last but that season.
That's true. I usually do a combination of evergreens, like your English ivy is an evergreen. It's there year-round. It doesn't freeze, and it'll keep growing and get fuller and prettier. The fern is going to be a perennial. I wouldn't call it evergreen. A winter could freeze it, but you can cut it back and it'll come back.
Okay.
In the center portion of the basket, typically, that's where you're going to want to put the brightest color, and I usually concentrate annuals in that area, because that's something that can be changed out every season. I usually say in the spring and summer we'll do impatiens or caladiums or terenias, and then when they die out, when winter gets here, you can leave everything else. Your fern will still be there, your ivy will still be there, and you can replace it with maybe cyclamen or something else that would tolerate the cooler weather without having to remake the entire basket.
Okay.
Now, a few exceptions on using evergreens. Any of you who've been to my container seminars know this. I don't recommend you use asparagus fern in a mixed basket. It is so aggressive, and it's beautiful the first few months you have it, but it grows so quickly that it literally chokes everything else out. And you'll hate it, because when you go to take the basket apart, you're going to have to get an axe to get those roots out of there, because it'll just take over everything. So I don't recommend you use that unless you put it in the basket by itself. This is the Color Essentials, which is a granular organic flowering plant food. Since I'm getting ready to put flowers in this section here, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of this just right around where those root balls are going to go. That just kind of gives it a boost to get it started blooming. It also has phosphorus in it, which is good for helping to establish roots. So that's going to go right around that area there. This is a really good product. They used to sell it under the name of Rose Glow. It was actually formulated for roses, but we found that it worked so well on other things that we have renamed it Color Essentials because you can use it on flowering annuals, perennials, trees and shrubs, anything flowering. It really seems to.
Wonderful for crepe myrtle.
It is. That's exactly how we discovered it. I had a crepe myrtle that had never bloomed, and I was flowering. I had flowering plants underneath it. I was fertilizing with the rose glow, and the crepe myrtle started blooming.
Can you use it on bougainvillea?
You can.
Does it make them flower?
It does. Now we've for years have recommended the hibiscus food, and
Right,
that
right.
works well too if you have